Ever wished you could, step inside the mind of a total genius?
Well, today we're going to try to do just that.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the world of Richard Feynman,
The Nobel Prize-winning physicist.
who is equal parts brilliant scientist and incredible storyteller.
And this isn't just, boring equations and theories.
No.
We're going on a wild ride through Feynman's life.
Yeah, using his autobiography? Surely. You're joking, Mr. Feynman.
Which is a total classic, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It takes us everywhere from cracking safes at Los Alamos
To playing Frigidaire in Brazil.
So our mission today is to uncover those unique ways Feynman approached
Learning.
problem solving.
And life itself.
I mean, who wouldn't want a little bit of Feynman's genius to rub off, right?
Right.
The book opens with Feynman's childhood,
And right away you can see this just incredible curiosity.
like a need to understand how things work.
It was there from the very beginning.
He wasn't just playing with radios, he was taking them apart,
Figuring out the circuitry.
even repairing them for neighbors.
I mean, how many kids do you know who build their own microphone from scratch?
Seriously?
Just to entertain their sister.
It's amazing.
What's so fascinating to me is that for Feynman, it wasn't really about the end result.
Yeah.
It was the journey,
The process.
the exploration that really drove him
And that spirit really stayed with him.
throughout his whole life,
I mean, even with something like math.
which a lot of people find really dry.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't content to just memorize formulas.
He had to invent his own problems.
Connect them to the real world.
Like that story about the flagpole and the rope.
Classic geometry problem, right?
Totally.
But Feynman reframed it,
He imagined needing to measure the height of a flagpole using only a rope.
and his own ingenuity.
Exactly.
Suddenly, it wasn't just an abstract idea.
It was a challenge.
A puzzle waiting to be solved.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Because Feynman wasn't just brilliant.
He was also kind of a rule breaker,
Yeah. You see that at MIT where he joins a Jewish fraternity?
despite not being religious.
He just liked the people.
Yeah, he even took their hazing rituals, like being left blindfolded by a frozen lake.
Totally in stride.
It's like he saw it as another puzzle to solve.
How do I stay warm?
How do I find my way back?
Exactly.
And this fearlessness, this willingness to question norms comes up again and again.
Throughout the whole book.
Like when he worked as a hotel desk clerk.
Oh, yeah. Instead of just answering the phone and taking messages.
He comes up with this incredibly elaborate system.
With index cards.
Cross-referencing.
Super brilliant.
But way too complicated for anyone else to use.
His poor aunt who owned the hotel probably wanted to tear her hair out.
Oh, I bet.
But it really shows you how Feynman was always looking for better ways of doing things,
More efficient ways.
even if they went against convention.
And that constant questioning wasn't just a quirk.
It was central to his genius.
Think about his observations on dreams.
Yeah. How do we see images when our eyes are closed?
Such a simple question.
But it reveals this just deep curiosity.
This desire to understand how the world works.
Even the most basic things.
It's something we could all learn from.
Absolutely. Welcome back to our deep dive into Richard Feynman.
So we've already seen his incredible curiosity in action.
From childhood tinkering to challenging those scientific norms.
But did you know that Feynman had this really amazing ability
To observe things that most of us miss.
and to ask these simple but really profound questions?
It's true, he noticed things others just didn't.
Like, remember his whole fascination with dreams?
Yeah.
How we can see images even when our eyes are closed?
It's such a simple observation
But it leads to these really deep questions.
about consciousness.
The nature of perception.
Really makes you think.
How often do we just accept things without really digging deeper?
Good point.
And this inquisitive side of Feynman
It wasn't limited to just science.
is how he approached everything.
Remember that story about the psychiatrist at Oak Ridge?
Oh, yeah.
I love that one.
His answers were so honest and straightforward,
That they were totally taken out of context.
leading to this hilarious misunderstanding.
It's almost like he was playing a prank on the psychiatrist.
Yeah, totally unintentionally, though.
Right.
But it also speaks to how authentic Feynman was,
He always stayed true to himself.
even if it meant being misunderstood sometimes.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another really important theme in the book.
Feynman's ability to embrace the absurdity of life.
He understood that life throws you curveballs.
And sometimes you just have to laugh.
I really admire that lightheartedness in him.
Me too.
It allowed him to see challenges in a totally new way.
And to find joy even in the tough times.
But it wasn't all fun and games for Feynman.
No, of course not.
He also experienced some really profound loss.
The death of his first wife, Arlene, was incredibly difficult for him.
especially because it happened while he was working on the Manhattan Project.
It was a very painful time for him.
And yet, even in his grief,
He found a way to find solace.
by trying to understand it,
Yeah, he focused on the science of it all.
the physiological processes,
The reality of death.
it might seem detached to some people.
But for Feynman, it was his way of processing his emotions.
It's a reminder that even brilliant minds,
Experience grief and loss.
and there's no one right way to cope with it.
Exactly.
Feynman's story shows us that even in the face of tragedy,
It's possible to find meaning.
and that can make us more resilient.
Absolutely.
And Feynman's journey took him far beyond the world of science.
To many different cultural...
Like Brazil and Japan.
Those experiences were really important to him.
Can you imagine trying to teach physics in Portuguese?
When you barely speak the language.
That's exactly what he did.
And then there's that story about his social faux pas with Professor Yukawa in Japan.
Where he thought he was being asked about the temperature.
But he was actually being offered a bath.
It's hilarious and kind of heartwarming at the same time.
It shows that even the most brilliant minds...
Make mistakes.
And that's okay.
What matters is that we learn from those mistakes.
And that we approach other cultures with humility.
And a genuine desire to understand.
I think some people might be wondering about Feynman's other passions.
Like his art.
His music.
Even the safe-cracking.
Right, they might seem unrelated to science.
But those interests actually tell us a lot about him.
About how he approached life and learning.
He wasn't afraid to try new things.
Even if they were unconventional for a scientist.
Like his drawing.
He started taking classes just to relax.
Maybe challenge his left brain a little.
But he ended up being really talented at it.
It just goes to show that we never really know what we're capable of.
Until we try.
And Feynman's art also shows us that he was comfortable with uncertainty.
With experimentation.
He didn't approach art with the same rigor as physics.
But he was willing to explore.
To find beauty in the process.
And then there's his music.
He loved drumming.
He wasn't a professional or anything.
But he loved the rhythm.
The energy.
The feeling of connection with other musicians.
I can just picture him playing the Frigidaire.
Which is a Brazilian frying pan used as a percussion instrument.
With a samba band.
It's such a great image.
And it really speaks to his adventurous spirit.
And who could forget his attempt to pass himself off as a professional bongo drummer in Paris?
He had no real training.
But he managed to fool a few audiences.
Just with his enthusiasm and storytelling skills.
Sometimes confidence can take you a long way.
That's for sure.
But maybe the most fascinating of Feynman's passions
was his safe-cracking?
It sounds like something out of a movie.
Right.
But it wasn't about being a criminal. It was about his curiosity.
About how things work.
Even if those things were meant to be kept secret.
His safe-cracking started at Los Alamos.
Where he realized he could open a lot of the supposedly secure safes.
Using just basic techniques and logic.
He wasn't trying to steal anything.
He was just curious about how secure those systems really were.
And how human error could be exploited.
He has all these great stories.
About cracking safes at Oak Ridge.
Even the captain's safe, which was supposed to be impossible to open.
Those stories are really amusing.
But they also make you think.
About the importance of critical thinking.
Attention to detail.
And thinking outside the box.
Those skills were definitely helpful in his scientific work.
It's almost like safe-cracking was a metaphor.
For how he approached science.
Breaking down complex problems.
Finding those hidden mechanisms.
And unlocking secrets.
Speaking of breaking down complex problems.
Let's go back to Feynman's work on beta decay theory.
This was a really intense period for him.
Where he was trying to understand the fundamental forces of the universe.
It wasn't an easy journey.
He had moments of pure exhilaration.
Like when he thought he had discovered a new law of nature.
Only to realize that others had already found it.
And he also faced setbacks.
When he realized he had been working with outdated data.
Which led him down the wrong path.
It just shows you how unpredictable scientific discovery can be.
And how important collaboration is.
And self-reflection.
But through all of it.
Feynman never wavered in his commitment to scientific integrity.
To being completely honest and transparent.
That's such an important lesson for anyone.
No matter what field you're in.
It's about letting the evidence speak for itself.
Even when it's not what you want to hear.
So we've seen Feynman, the scientist,
the cultural explorer,
the artist,
the drummer,
the safecracker.
It's hard to put him in a box.
So who was Richard Feynman at his core?
That's the question we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We're going to talk about the enduring lessons we can learn from him.
Lessons that can help us all live more curious and fulfilling lives.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
We've been spending some time with Richard Feynman.
This guy who just defied categorization.
Total genius physicist.
But also a little bit mischievous.
Cultural explorer.
Even a safecracker.
It's this multifaceted nature of Feynman that I think makes him so fascinating.
For sure.
And in this last part of our deep dive,
we want to really zero in on some key takeaways
from Feynman's life and work.
Lessons that we can all apply to our own lives. One of the biggest lessons that just comes up again and again, and surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman,
is the importance of asking questions.
Even the dumb ones.
Even if you're afraid of sounding silly.
Feynman never let that get in the way of understanding something.
He wasn't afraid to look foolish.
It's like that time at Los Alamos.
Oh, yeah, with the blueprints.
He didn't pretend to know everything.
He just pointed to a symbol and said, hey, what's this?
And that simple question
revealed a major flaw
in the design.
It's incredible.
It reminds me of that quote.
The only stupid question is the one you don't ask.
Exactly.
Feynman embodied that.
Another key takeaway
is just how much Feynman loved to learn.
He wasn't driven by awards
or recognition.
It was pure curiosity.
But like a kid in a candy store.
It makes you think about how we approach learning sometimes.
As a chore.
Right. Or something we have to do.
Not something we want to do.
But Feynman shows us that learning can be an adventure.
Something exciting.
And he was all about hands-on experimentation.
He wanted to see how things worked in the real world.
And he wasn't afraid of failing.
He saw it as part of the process.
That's so important.
To be able to learn from our mistakes.
And then there's his sense of humor.
And perspective.
He really understood that life is full of crazy stuff.
Unexpected twists and turns.
And sometimes the best way to deal with that is to laugh.
Remember the story with the psychiatrist?
At Oak Ridge?
Oh, yeah.
His answers were so honest.
But they were totally misinterpreted.
It was hilarious.
You could have gotten upset.
But he just laughed it off.
It's a good reminder to not take things too seriously.
Sometimes you just got to roll with the punches.
And maybe the most important lesson from Feynman
is to be yourself.
He never tried to fit in.
He embraced his quirks.
His unique way of seeing things.
Like joining that Jewish fraternity at MIT.
Even though he wasn't religious.
Or teaching physics in Portuguese.
In Brazil.
He followed his own path.
He was true to himself.
And that's what made him so special. So as we wrap up this deep dive
into the world of Richard Feynman,
we're left with some really powerful lessons.
Embrace your curiosity.
Find joy in learning.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Approach life with a sense of humor.
And most importantly, be yourself.
If you haven't read too, surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman.
Yeah.
Yet.
You're missing out.
It's an incredible book.
Full of amazing stories.
And inspiring insights.
You'll never look at the world the same way again.
And be sure to subscribe to our channel.
For more deep dives.
Into fascinating subjects.
Share this episode with your friends.
And until next time.
Stay curious.